Hey, this is Notser, and we're going to look at HE penetration. HE penetration is an interesting topic, and I've honestly never had to know this stuff because I could just outplay my targets. I really am not going to lie to you. Most of the time in games, I don't have to do a lot of research because I can just straight up beat people with my skill. Reflexes, I don't know what it is, combination of aim, technique, whatever it is, I'm one of those people that doesn't need to study for tests. I can just get it at B+ or an A-, putting no effort into it whatsoever, and that's just how I've lived my life. I'm sorry. I honestly did not know any of this. And apparently, every other community contributor, every other main major voice in the community knew all of this. And yet, I find that their content doesn't really do it justice by informing you of their choices moment to moment. If you know that this particular skill allows you to do these things, I would expect that this person would explain that outside of a single video with a list of ships where stuff is now penetration and non-penetration. Wouldn't you? It seems like it's a really, really, really important thing for people to understand. This is why I'm shooting this part of the ship. This is why I'm not shooting this part of the ship. So through the investigation, I have discovered a couple things, talking to the community, talking to my Twitch chat. Apparently, HE penetration is calculated by taking the gun caliber, whichever it might be. Let's use 152 in this example, divided by 6, which would give us a number 25.3 repeating, of course. Leroy Jenkins. And this number is now dictating what armor you can do damage to with your HE shell. HE penetration is not something that's going to get you citadels. Oh, no, no, no. This is just dictating whether you do damage to that section of the ship, period. If I try and fire at a section of the ship that has 26 millimeters of armor with a 25.3 millimeter penetration gun with the HE, it will do 0 damage and it will shatter on that ship, theoretically. Correct? And one of the accepted universal facts that I've discovered is that they always round up. You might have heard that. HE penetration, whatever the number is, they always round that number up. So 25.3 repeating should go up to 26, right? Now, through my testing, and we're about to test this, that is incorrect. Wherever that comes from, the Wikipedia, community contributors, developers, wherever that phrase comes from, always rounding up, is incorrect. And I will show you why. We are looking at the Hindenburg. Why did you choose the Hindenburg? Well, because the Hindenburg has a 25 millimeter, at least right now, bow and stern. This is changing in 0.6.4. It's going up to 27. The reason it's going up to 27 is they want to push these thresholds up to force inertia fuse high explosive to be the solution, and they don't want blindly to beat it. 155 millimeters can blindly beat 25 millimeters because it gets up to, like, I think it's 25.5 or 25.6. And you would think that would round up too, right? I have the theory, and we're going to do testing to prove that theory. I believe they round to the nearest whole number, the nearest absolute value. So 25.3 is actually being rounded down to 25. And 25 is not a larger number than the 25 armor that is on the bow of the Hindenburg. Therefore, all my shells should shatter on the bow, in theory. Now, that is without inertia fuse. That's 152 millimeters. If I got inertia fuse high explosive, that would improve the penetration force. That should allow me to penetrate it. Now, inertia fuse is 30% better penetration. So all we do is take that number and times it by 1.3, which is 130%. It should knock it up to 32.93 repeating, which would go up to 33 if it's rounding up. And if it's rounding to the next absolute number, the closest whole number, it's still going to be 33, which will easily clear the 25 threshold. So we're going to test this out and want to see if my theory is correct, that it is not rounding up globally, it is rounding to the nearest whole number. And honestly, I don't know why this couldn't easily be proven by anyone. I'm just curious why I hear things. It really doesn't help that Wargaming doesn't have this stuff in the game. The fact that you have to go looking for this is upsetting. So let's go test this out. Can we penetrate with a 152 millimeter gun on the bow without inertia fuse high explosive? So we're out here testing it out. It's a tier 6 Budyonny. This has 152 millimeter guns, you know, laser guns that the Soviets have. I do not have inertia fuse high explosive. So theoretically, the gun penetration should be 25.3 repeating. Now, 25.3 repeating, if it rounds up, should penetrate the bow of the Hindenburg. That is 25 millimeters. We just saw that in game, right? That is the theory that we're trying to test. Now, I believe it actually does not round up. It rounds to the nearest whole number, and in fact, you have to be greater than, you cannot be equal to the armor. If you have equal armor penetration, it's basically going to stop the round just barely before it enters the ship. You have to clear it with a greater than. So that's why it hasn't been working, and that's why some people are like confused with how it works. So we're setting up a shot on the bow, 25 millimeters. That particular part of the ship should be 40, but the front of the bow is 25 millimeters. And not a single shell does any damage to the ship. It all shatters on the bow without inertia fuse high explosive. This is 25.3 millimeters of penetration shooting 25 millimeters of armor. Now, why is it failing? And yeah, you can still set parts of the ship on fire even if you don't do any damage. The reason it's failing is because they're rounding to 25. 25 is not greater than 25, so therefore 0 damage is done. This is how shatter works in the game. It's just something you should know. So when you say to yourself, oh, HE, you know, all this stuff, it does damage, doesn't do damage, this number is actually very important. Sometimes you're presented with just the bow of a target. The bow, his guns, and a little bit of superstructure. And you're trying to do damage to him before he kills you. I've been in this scenario many times, and it feels very frustrating in order to have to deal with it. You cannot deal with it without using inertia fuse high explosive or rotating around it in many scenarios. I had a Des Moines with 27 millimeters of armor on their bow come at my Hobodovsk. My Hobodovsk did not have any inertia fuse high explosive. 130 millimeter gun cannot penetrate, cannot do damage to 27 millimeters of armor. 130 is 21.6 repeating, which is 22 in the game, the way they calculate it. 22 is obviously a smaller number than 27. But if I times that by 1.3, which would be 130%, so that's where I get the 30%, it bumps my penetration force up to 28.16 repeating. Of course, I can't help it. That is larger than the 27. That's a pretty important threshold to pass. And that's what really needs to be explained. Not that, oh, it's a minor improvement. No, your Hobodovsk will be able to bow pen or stern pen, just do damage with HE with inertia fuse high explosive against all those enemy cruisers that are hanging out around you. A lot of cruisers at tier 10 have this specific threshold, and we're going to test this theory at the back half of the ship. But a lot of cruisers hanging out at tier 10, they have that 27 millimeter requirement. That is a pretty important requirement. So yeah, I think this is extremely important for people to know. I don't understand why people in the community who know this don't express this particular knowledge. The Moskva is 25 millimeters. Without inertia fuse high explosive, you can't do any damage to its bow or its stern. With inertia fuse high explosive, you can do bow damage to bow and stern damage with your Hubelowsk. That's a pretty important threshold to tell people. Don't you think? Yeah, I think so too. And for me personally, deck armor's okay. I don't really care about deck armor. I care about bow and stern armor. Those are very important to getting the most out of your damage, because the ship will slowly start absorbing damage, and you won't be able to do anything. And look, the stern that has 25 millimeters of armor is also fully absorbing these shots. We are not doing any damage to the parts of the ship that are 25 millimeters. That's because it is rounding to the nearest whole number, and it's equal to the armor, so it can't bypass it. So we're going to check out another clip, and this clip is going to have inertia fuse high explosive in 152 millimeters. So we are in the Tier 8 Chapayev 152 millimeter guns. It does have an inertia fuse high explosive. That is the only difference between the gun calibers that we have seen. They're both 152 Soviet guns. We'll see. Will we be able to do damage to 25 millimeter protection on the bow of the Hindenburg? This is a very interesting part of the test. And we do indeed do full damage. Not a single shatter. It does exactly as predicted. Because it has greater than 25 millimeters of HE penetration, it does full damage to the section. And some were like, well, now it's blackened. Is it going to drop off in damage output? So far, it doesn't look like it. I do have a theory, and I don't know how I could prove that theory, that inertia fuse high explosive sort of protects the HE from dropping to near zero on a damage absorbed section. If you don't know, the sections of the ship, they have about 80% of the health of the ship, and as you do damage to that section, it makes you do less and less and less and less damage until there's no health in that section left for HE, and it should do zero damage. Well, we are not having any issues doing basically full damage on the ship in that section. And I keep doing a check to see if it will ever drop off, and it still is right around 4,000 per salvo. And we're getting closer and closer and closer to the full life of the ship. We've only hit 8 there. Still seems about in the range it needs to be. Because I think we have 12 guns, right? We have 12. Yeah, it's still in the section, and I don't know how much it burned. Maybe it burned 20%. Who knows? Either way, we 100-0 that guy at the bow. Previously, we were not able to penetrate it. With inertia fuse high explosive, we were, and inertia fuse high explosive actually brings a lot online. It turns 25 millimeters of HE pin into 33 millimeters of HE pin. That is a big jump. You have just engulfed every single bow and stern of every single cruiser and battleship. That's a big, big addition. It's probably the single biggest jump in sections of the ships that are now damageable are vulnerable to your shell. That's a better way to say it. Vulnerable to your shell. So I think it's extremely good, but if you don't know how to use it, you won't be able to take advantage of that. You want to try and damage sections of the ship that have not sustained damage with HE. That's basically the theory. So what I was looking at here, there's a 40 millimeter section of the bow, and it should be immune to the HE. It should shatter on it, but I can't exactly look at the armor layout in the actual game. I'm asking my chat, hey, where is it? Where is it? I know it's somewhere in front of the gun. I don't know where. I'm actually aiming a little bit too high. It's at the waterline, so that's why I'm shooting there. But as far as this is concerned, we basically confirmed it is not rounding globally up. It is rounding to the nearest whole number. If the whole number is equal to or less than the armor presented, it will shatter on that section of the ship. I don't know why community contributors or just people in general are not more upfront about exactly why they're shooting at different sections of the ship, explaining it in excruciating detail, because that's important. It's just like why I choose to lead a target out of a turn with torpedoes or not. It takes 3 to 5 seconds to explain it, but every single time, that is informing a new person about this technique, and they're a better player because of it. That's the goal here. Make the community better, and you will definitely hear me explaining more about each section of the ship, why I'm shooting it with my HE or my AP. I hope this was helpful. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.